Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Transform Digital as Built in Construction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Harvey and I am the Managing Editor of Utility Magazine, and we're thrilled to be partnering with Locusview to bring you this webinar today. Before I go any further, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're all meeting today. For me, here in Melbourne, that is the Wurundjeri people, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all Australian delegates are located today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. So let's get stuck into the ways digital technology is transforming as built in construction. Today, we'll be hearing from Andrew Foley, the General Manager of Locusview Australia, and Andy Treadway, Director of Asset Integrity and Reporting at Atmos Energy. Both of our speakers have a depth of experience in the fields of energy, utilities and construction and have a wealth of knowledge that they're going to be sharing with us today. But before I properly introduce our speakers, I wanted to remind everyone that today's session is interactive. So if you do have any questions for our presenters, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I'll be keeping an eye on the questions that come in throughout the presentation today, and I'll direct them to our speakers when they both conclude their presentations. Now, before we get into the presentations, we'd like to begin today by running a quick poll to find out what have been the biggest challenges that your organisation has faced during construction projects. Now, that poll box is going to pop up on your screen now, and you'll see that we're keen to know what are your biggest challenges during a construction project. You'll see 5 different options on screen there, and if you could just select the one answer that represents your biggest challenge, that would be great. Great, thanks everyone for taking the time to answer that poll. Now you can see on screen that we have published the results of that poll. So you can see there's a clear winner down the bottom, too many systems for managing projects, which absolutely can be a challenge. And then we've got, coming in second is incomplete, missing or low accuracy data. And sending data into GIS taking too long is also a bit of an issue there for some of our respondents today. So our speakers today will touch on the results in their presentations. So thank you for taking the time to vote there. We do appreciate it, and that will help inform some of the discussion for today. All right, but for now, let's get things underway with our first speaker, Andrew Foley, who is the General Manager at Locusview Australia. Andrew has over 20 years of experience in utilities across a range of disciplines at senior executive level, and he's currently leading Locustview's team for the Asia Pacific region. He has a strong history of delivering improved performance in customer service, growth, operational efficiency, capital construction and asset management. Andrew has a master's degree in applied finance and undergraduate studies in applied mathematics and finance. Today, Andrew will be talking about the ways in which the construction process can be digitised. I'll now hand over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Laura, and welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you about how the entire construction process can actually be fully digitised. So, just a little background to who we are, because some of you may not have heard of Locusview before. So we're a tech company, been around since sort of the mid-2010s, and the first release of our product was around sort of 2018. We essentially emerged from an R&D program that was done in conjunction with a group called the Gas Technology Institute in the US, and some of the drivers that were sort of there for the development were really sort of around changes in regulation. The regulator there introduced this concept called Know Your Assets, and as utilities were spending billions of dollars per annum renewing and replacing their assets, there was really an opportunity to improve the quality of the data they collect, and just streamline the entire process into some kind of digital construction platform rather than sort of rely on this hybrid digital and paper. So we've grown pretty quickly. We've got a global presence now, and there's approximately 5,000 crews globally at the moment using Locusview today and every day. So when we speak to our utilities, we ask them about their pain points, and we've just sort of seen some feedback from the poll around pain points. We tend to find, as we sort of see in those poll results, that their pain points there's not a single one that they can sort of focus in on and say, if you could fix this for us, that'd be great. It tends to be across the sort of entire construction life cycle. We hear that, in preparing for the project, there's challenges in putting together a single job package because sources of data and information come in either electronically or paper. They might have digital records in terms of CAD drawings, but they've got paper documents in terms of things like council permits that might come in. And then we see during construction, and I think this came up in some of the feedback, that the crews are using, if they're using a digital data collection tool in the field, they've got multiple systems, so that the crew's interface for their digital data collection is really driven by the back office systems and not by the crew's not focused on the crew's sort of user experience. And that means the crews are often left sort of moving in and out of various applications to collect the field data, and also means that in some cases, they're actually duplicating the inputs. We also see that crews are still using paper. So we see things like as constructed drawings. Crews are essentially using the sort of grid ruled paper to capture as-builts. And that means important documents like the as-builts, inspection forms, maybe their safety forms, they're all still on paper. And that can result in sort of incomplete data, or it can result in documents being lost, left in the back of the cabin out in the field. And meanwhile, while this is all taking place, the PMs who really want some visibility on what the hell's happening out in the field, they're waiting on documents to come in. They've got managers, they want reports on what's happening in the field. So they have no real-time visibility for the field, how the project's going. And then finally, at closeout, there's no real single source of truth, where we've got all these documents, all these reports coming in, but we can't actually point to a single point where we say, this is where all the information is. And with potential paper documents to go missing, there can be delays in things like closing out the project for the utility and for their service provider, for their contractors. Those delays might mean actually delays in getting payments as well. So we like to work with the utilities and help them resolve those pain points. First, in preparing the project, our technology enables the creation of a digital job packet. So whilst there might be multiple sources where the information can come from, information, things like work procedures, work orders, designs that can be directly uploaded to the project, other information that might be on paper that can be scanned in PDF and uploaded to the project. And what that means is you can create this digital job packet that's sent to the crew. And that means they have everything they need in one place, digitally on their tablet in the field, and they're not foraging through a paper folder the document they want, or pulling out a tear-off pad to complete a form that's then going to be sent into the back office later on. Next, because our system is technology and system agnostic, we can effectively provide a single user experience for the crew. So there's one application that the crew needs to go into to collect all of the data that's required for the project. So the other thing is with that, Locusview then aims to automate as much of that data collection process as we can. So we can use technology like barcode scanning, Bluetooth, and we can do things then like collecting materials data and information. We can validate field competencies of their training cards, and we can upload data from things like fusion machines, which are Bluetooth enabled. So we can give you automatic upload of things like time, temperature, current. Importantly, through all that, we remove the need for paper in the field. So we create all the documents, those things like as constructed drawings, they are created in the field at the time of construction and not after the fact. So you don't have a crew leader finishing work for the day, taking a bit of grid rule home, and then at the dinner table that night, sort of a couple of the dimensions they took in the field, they're drawing up the as constructeds for that day. And all the while, the project manager or the supervisor, they can use the Locusview web portal, and they can view in real time how the project is progressing. So they can ask questions if they want. But essentially, they get to see as every meter of pipe goes in the ground, they get to see as that goes and gets recorded. And then finally, all the data and information, all those forms, all the drawings, any site inspections that were done, they're all linked back to the project, and they all come together to create this digital closing package. And what that means is Locusview can then push any of that data we've collected into the relevant system in the background. So the crew hasn't had to worry about moving in and out of multiple applications. We collect the data through our interface, and then we can push it through to your finance system, we can push it through to your GIS, and we push it through to your asset management system. So the project gets closed faster, the data is collected, is consistent, and gets pushed to the system faster, and all the information for the project is digital. So I guess just to close out, Locusview, we were the result of an industry R&D project. We're basically created by utilities for utilities, and we have this goal to have all the data into the relevant system of record in 24 hours. I saw some of the feedback there. I think someone said, getting information in the GIS was taking a while. Using Locusview's technology, we can essentially get the data as it's constructed in the field and into the GIS in less than a day. We basically achieved this by creating this digital construction electronic job package that just pushed to the field, where they use the Locusview mobile technology to collect all of the relevant data, create the as-builts. In the background, the project manager is using the web portal to track and get real-time visibility of how the project is going. And then once it's done, it's all been backfilled, we can create the electronic closing package for that project, and then ultimately push that through so the project can get closed much faster and create this whole digital thread all the way through the bit. Now, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Andy today on Atmos's journey, and really having the opportunity, maybe after Andy's presentation, to answer some of your questions and have a bit of a chat about how you can transform your construction into a digital construction process.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Andrew. It was great to hear a little bit more about how that construction process can be digitised with Locusview. And as I said, very exciting to hear from Andy now to hear about their journey with the technology. So let's introduce Andy Treadway now. Andy is the Director of Asset Integrity and Reporting at Atmos Energy. Andy has spent 33 years in the oil and gas industry, with the last 26 years working for Atmos Energy. In his current role as the Director of Asset Integrity and Reporting, Andy provides strategic direction and oversight of enterprise asset data collection and reporting and analytics. His group maintains ownership of associated business system applications and ensures alignment with corporate policies and state and federal regulations. Andy has a bachelor's degree in natural gas engineering and a master's degree in engineering management. I'll now hand over to you, Andy.
Thank you again for having me today. To tell you a little bit about Atmos Energy, we're one of the largest pure play natural gas only companies in the U.S. We have a little over 3 million customers throughout 8 states. We're in Colorado, Kansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. We have around 4,700 employees. We own and operate approximately 70,000 miles of distribution piping and 6,700 miles of intrastate transmission piping. We take pride in our focus on employee and community safety at Atmos, and our corporate headquarters is located in Dallas, Texas, which is where I office. Our group is basically the functional business owner of various applications supporting engineering, operations, GIS, and compliance activities, focusing primarily on the technology, on the data collection, data quality, data analytics, and reporting, as Laura mentioned. Next slide, please. For the last decade or so, Atmos has really focused considerable effort on modernizing our business in order to enhance customer service, mitigate risk, and improve the employee user experience. For instance, we introduced a new customer service system, a much improved work dispatch system for our service and compliance technicians, workforce planning tools, as well as a new GIS system with our migration to Esri that's currently happening. In 2018, we began our deployment of the topic of today's conversation, Locust Map. Next slide, please. Prior to the introduction of LocusMap, our company and contract field construction crews documented all asset information on paper using an enterprise closing package. At this time, we had begun an enterprise-wide effort to replace aging infrastructure on both our transmission and our distribution systems in order to mitigate risk and reduce methane emissions. Because of that work, we were capturing asset information on 5,000 to 6,000 capital projects each year and on tens of thousands of small blanket jobs for the smaller repair or replacement work. We estimated that, for example, a small 1,000-foot, 2-inch steel pipe main replacement with 10 service lines, we would require the field personnel to capture over 500 points of data. If you multiply that by the number of projects and blanket jobs performed each year, we were documenting millions of data points. That's a lot of data being documented by a human. And with that comes the potential, as you can imagine, for data quality issues, as you guys mentioned in your poll earlier, being one of your concerns. Now, in the U.S., we're federally regulated by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA for short, under Federal Code 49 CFR 192 for natural gas systems. In that code, it states that each operator must know their systems, know what you have and where the assets are located, meaning that all records shall be traceable, verifiable, accurate, and complete. The enforcement of this code is generally administered by the individual states who routinely audit our records. To meet this compliance requirement for traceable, verifiable, accurate, and complete records, each project goes through a detailed manual review of the information captured. In some divisions, prior to LocusMap, this was carried out by local construction support staff. In others, by an entire department dedicated to data quality assurance. Completing these reviews in the paper world took time, so it could take weeks or even months from the time that gas was introduced in the pipe until it was mapped in the GIS system. This lag caused invoicing issues. It caused potential risk of damaged facilities not being located when requested, and potential compliance-related issues associated with inadequate data. As-built drawings of the newly installed facilities were first sketched by hand by the field crews. Then a GIS technician had to input them into our GIS system and add all the associated attribute information manually. Now, you can see the theme here. There were a lot of manual steps in this whole construction process, and we knew there had to be a better way. Next slide, please. So we met with various stakeholders from engineering, operations, compliance, and IT to determine what we wanted to accomplish with digital tracking and as-builting, as well as the benefits we hope to obtain. In general, we wanted to capture accurate and consistent information in a digital format that would be easily accessible for analysis and reporting. We wanted very accurate GPS coordinates in order to locate assets at some future date if needed. We also wanted an application that could be used by the field construction personnel, as they're the ones that were in the ditch installing the pipe. Next slide, please. In 2016, after a digital data capture and as-builting product review, we decided to perform a pilot with the LocusMap application. And we had actually, Atmos had been one of the funders for the R&D work that the Gas Technology Institute had put into this in the early days. And we felt it would be definitely an application we wanted to look at since we'd helped fund it. The application was still in its infancy at this time, but it really showed potential through the pilot. So we sat down with Locustview the following March of 2017 and let them know what we were looking for. And over the next 2 years, we worked with Locusview to enhance the application to fit our needs. And as I'd mentioned, we wanted to be able to take advantage of modern barcode scanning that was just being standardized for the plastic gas pipe industry for asset capture. We wanted to be able to verify the operator qualifications of those performing the tasks, the construction tasks, such as plastic fusion or welding on steel pipe. And we wanted to know where those joints were located. We also wanted to have the ability to review and approve the work in real time, generate reports for our various systems of records, and integrate with our GIS systems. Next slide, please. In the fall of 2018, we were ready and we began our deployment phase of the Locus Map application. You know, one of the keys to any successful project is a proper change management and communication plan. We engaged our business process and change management team at Atmos to help draft what our change management and communication plan would be for both our company employees and the vast number of contract resources we use. Newsletters and posters like the one you see on the slide were distributed to all of our divisional offices, which we have about 90 different divisional offices throughout our footprint. Presentations were given to divisional and shared services leadership teams. The Locus Map application was featured on several of our quarterly all-employee broadcasts. Divisional deployment leads were named, and they would be the change champions in the field. They would be the voice of this project we were getting ready to undertake. Now, although Atmos does have a technical training department, we knew that providing training for such a large group of people, requiring both classroom and hands-on training, would just really overwhelm that group. They weren't that large. So we partnered with a third-party training organization located in the Dallas metro area to help develop training material and provide the training for both company and contract workers. This organization had the ability to train locally at their facility here in the Dallas area, or they had mobile trailers that they could go out to the other divisions and train there, which made it a lot better than trying to have all these employees and all these contractors come to Dallas. They could get training in their local areas, because as part of that training, the first day would be classroom, and then they would actually go out on the production jobs after that. They would be using the application and the associated equipment in the field that very next day. Since we have a large contingent of Spanish-only speaking contractors, this training group also provided the training in English and in Spanish. We opted to have a phased deployment instead of taking a big bang approach and going out to the entire enterprise at once. We took each state, each division at a time and deployed it there. And this really proved to be a wise decision, as we learned many lessons with each deployment. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that Atmos grew through acquisition. So in all these different gas companies that we acquired, they all had their own processes. They all had their own way of doing things. And even though we had a consistent closing package, they still had different ways of moving that data into different systems. So we learned with each deployment the questions we needed to ask to make this process flow more smoothly. We've completed all the training for all divisions but our Mid-Tex division, and that's the largest group we have located here in Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. They're about half the size of the company. We were actually on track to complete this training last year, but paused all training throughout the company due to the pandemic, as many organizations did. We've since started back and are scheduled to complete all remaining training for contractors and company employees by the end of September of this year. And by the way, we actually upgraded to version 2 of the application during the pandemic and had to provide refresher training to all users that were using the technology in the field. This wasn't an easy task, as all training was required to be done using both CDC and our company protocols that were established to keep everyone safe. Next slide, please. This is the equipment that we use with the Locus Map application. You've got everything in a nice, tidy Pelican box there. You've got your barcode scanner. your GPS receiver for capturing high accuracy GPS data. You have a tablet that the crews use in the field for documenting the information. And then you have a range pole that the GPS receiver sits on. For the most part, we handle the equipment through a managed service agreement with Locustview. Both Atmos and our contractors leased all the equipment, including the RTK base stations, real-time kinematic base stations that are required to get the very high accurate GPS data. We leased all that directly from Locustview. And this has worked out really well, honestly. Locustview is responsible for providing both new and replacement equipment for those hopefully rare times when there's an equipment malfunction. And they can usually turn that around within 24 hours, which has been very beneficial. Locustview also maintains a help desk staff to provide troubleshooting aid for our employees and contractors. This staff also has both English and Spanish speaking members of their team to help us if our contractors call in, and we tell them your first call for help is to Locustview if it's a technology related issue, and they've been able to help these contractors and employees very well. Next slide, please. Now, what you're seeing here is what we call the work review tool. It's that web application that Andrew referred to earlier. And so once the construction crews have completed the job and submitted it for approval, it goes to these project manager, work reviewers, whatever you want to call them, and they use this web application to review the data collected and the various digital forms associated with that data. And they can see that in real time, which is really nice too. When they're going through and looking at the job, they can see any alerts or violations that pop up that are based on some built-in business rules in the application. They can see that quickly. They can have the crew correct any mistakes while still on the job site, which is nice. You don't have to go back out and dig something up, which sometimes happened in the paper world. If data was missing, you could potentially have to send the crew back out to dig something up and get that information off the pipe or valves or fittings. Once the work has been reviewed and approved, a JSON file is sent to our GIS system. This system also has built-in business rule scripts that must be satisfied before final editing by a GIS technician. Any projects that fail these scripts are sent to an exception reporting application that we call LEXTA, which is basically Locustview exception reporting. We built it in-house, and someone is responsible for reviewing that and making corrections so that it can go in the GIS system from there. Next slide, please. What you see here is our work detail report, and in addition to the JSON file, each approved project gets one of these reports, which is in a PDF format, and it contains all the data gathered for each asset, as well as any photographs that were taken in the field. You can take photographs with the tablet in the field, and we typically try to take photographs of all the joints. If there are any complicated below ground tie-ins, we take photos of those. We take photos of pressure gauges and just any other pertinent information that we feel like would be good to have. Since we don't currently have interfaces with any other applications but our GIS, these are the reports that our personnel use to enter information into other systems of record, such as our asset compliance or our financial systems. Next slide, please. And we also use that work detail report whenever we have one of our state regulatory auditors come in. They look at that report to review, make sure we've captured all the data. So just to give you an idea of how many crews we've got currently using it, we've got approximately, it's actually larger than that now, we've got about 900 crews total that are using the mobile application in the field, including 135 company crews. When we get through, that number is probably going to be somewhere close to 1,000, 1,100 crews total that'll be using it. We also have 521 back office support personnel. Those are the work reviewers, the GIS staff, other compliance staff that interact with the work detail report or with the web review tool, things of that nature. Of those contract crews, we have 70 construction contract organizations that we have that Locustview has contracts with to use the application and the equipment. We also have 475 contract inspectors. They are third-party inspectors that go out and audit the jobs in the field. They also have access to this work review tool and can help review that information in real time to get things corrected, or if there's data missing, they can have all that taken care of in the field. Today, we've collected data on over 1,100 miles of main assets that's either new pipe or replacement pipe. We've collected data on over 100,000 services that we've installed, once again, new or replacement services that are part of our pipe replacement program. And through all of this, all of the thousands and thousands of jobs that have been done, we've maintained about 1.5 inch GPS accuracy, which is phenomenal, quite honestly. Next slide. So what have we seen with Locustview? What are some of the improvements? Well, first of all, we've certainly seen a reduction in data errors, primarily human data errors with this application by being able to scan the barcodes. It really ensures that we get the correct asset information and have that input into our systems. Whereas before, you would have to manually write down the print line date on every piece of pipe that you put in. Those are 16-digit numbers, letters, combinations. You can imagine getting those transposed, other errors associated with writing it on a piece of paper. The barcode scan standard for plastic, which is F2897, it includes all the information needed for plastic assets that are required by our compliance regulatory bodies. What's nice about that, we recently found out from one of our pipe manufacturers that they had a pipe wall thickness issue in a production lot that they had recently produced. We were able to quickly determine if and where we installed this lot of pipe because we had all that data in a digital format that we could query. And then if we did have any of it, we could go in and make repairs as needed. In the paper world, prior to Locust Map, this would have taken weeks or really probably even months to do by having to go back and manually go through every project, having somebody review all those pieces of paper to see if we'd used that. So that's really added a lot of value. So anytime you have a potential lot issue or something with a valve or a fitting, you know where they've been installed. You have very accurate GPS, and you can go back out there and quickly ascertain where your issues are. The business rules that are built into the application also catch potential data entry errors and allows them to be corrected much sooner. We've seen a vast improvement in the time it takes to get information into our various systems of record. On average, our projects are usually mapped within 14 days of submittal. In the paper world, we often saw projects linger for months with back and forth paper handoffs to correct errors, to add data that wasn't there, and then go through all that manual review. And as our reviewers get more comfortable with the application, our goal is to reduce that 14-day timeline down to less than 7 days. And I think we can accomplish that. We built up a backlog due to a lot of work that has been going on over the last several years in our pipe replacement programs. And as they get used to going in, they know where the data is in the application. They can review it quicker. And as I said, we hope to get that down to less than 7 days. Obviously, larger projects take more time to review and may exceed that goal, but even so, it's still better than what we had in the paper world. And as I mentioned, the accuracy of the GPS data is just phenomenal. It's really helping us to locate assets faster with less excavation needed. You're not having to go out and dig up entire blocks to find a valve or something that's been covered over. You can know exactly where it is within that inch and a half or so. Next slide. So we're now moving from an active project into an application support mode, and we'll be working with a dedicated customer success team at Locusview as we look at future enhancements to the product, as well as interfacing with other applications in our operations and engineering processes, work management systems, compliance systems, financial systems, procurement systems, things of that nature. We've got a roadmap built out over the next several years to interface a lot of those applications. For now, there's no barcode steel standard, but through the efforts of Locusview and other industry groups, such as the Gas Technology Institute in Chicago that Andrew mentioned earlier, we hope to have that standard in place one day as well. And until then, our crews, they use drop-down menus to select steel materials. It works very well. We've got a list of all of our approved materials in the application, so they can go in and based on conditionality rules, if they're working with plastic, it's not going to show any steel materials. If they're working with steel, vice versa, it's not going to show any plastic, and they can quickly go in and determine what their materials are from there. Next slide, please. We certainly had our challenges in this journey, and it took flexibility and open communication to make this project work. Both Atmos and Locustview have dedicated teams in place to work very hard to make it a success. We had a shared vision to bring to market an industry best practice for paperless as-builting. We've had a very collaborative design process throughout. We did have a dedicated effort for change management, as I mentioned earlier, which is very important to make sure that people will adopt the technology. They'll know the why, the how, and the what's that's going to happen. And we're all, both Atmos and Locustview, are committed to continuous improvements, along with their other clients. We work with and have discussions with other users of the technology to make sure we're all on the same page, trying to get to the same place with improvements and enhancements. And all of this is in an effort to make our system safer for our customers, our employees, and the general public. That's all I had to present. So thank you for your time. And as Andrew said, I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Andy. Really great to hear about your first-hand experience using Locusview, and particularly great to hear about such a large client with such a massive network using Locusview so successfully. I've got time now to go to questions from our audience, so I will start with those. And the first question that's come through is for you. So Andy, the question that I've got here is, you spoke about safety as being one of the main drivers for implementing the technology, but it seems like you gained a lot more than just that from bringing Locusview on board. What would you say has been the most important benefit for your organisation that's come from working with Locusview?
I think there are many, but if I had to probably focus on one, it is that traceable, accurate, complete data that we're getting now. That has always been a challenge in the past. You know, people not understanding the importance of that data, and now the user experience is so good that we've just seen so much better data quality now, and the ability to get that into our systems of record so much faster has been a very huge benefit to this. And that benefits not just safety, but compliance and also the confidence that our people have in the data when they query it for reporting and analytics and things of that nature.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Andy. Andrew, I might go to you now for your take on this one too. Obviously, you've worked with a number of different clients that have used the technology. with all of the different benefits that are available, what do you hear from customers and clients about the main benefit or the number one benefit that they enjoy from having implemented Locusview?
Yeah, good question, because I think Andy's covered a good number of them. I think I have this thing about better data equals better decision making. So if I'm getting better data and better data I can rely on, I'm going to get much better decision making from an asset management perspective going forward. Andy's touched on safety. I kind of think there's two aspects to that. One is what we consider sort of HSE here is, we know if we can get the JSAs started, we can get that digitized, and people can check straight away that before they've even started work, they've completed their safety forms, so they can see that in the back office. That ability to verify competencies and qualifications that people have done the work, and it actually also helps you with conversations with your regulator. But also that speed of delivery into the GIS. In Australia, for example, there's a lot of older assets running what we call sort of low pressure that are slowly getting upgraded to high pressure. Some of these are sort of larger diameter cast iron mains being inserted with polyethylene, lower diameter, but going sort of small 1 or 2 kPa up to sort of 400 kPa. Now, if it takes 4 or 6 months to get that as constructed or that as built from the field into that GIS, there is an incident in that period of time. The crew doesn't really know when they get to site, relying on the GIS. Are they dealing with a cast iron main at low pressure? Or are they dealing with an inserted cast iron main at high pressure? And I think that makes a really big difference if the crew have confidence that the data they're getting and they know what they're going to confront when they get into there. The other one that I was always interested from Andy is this idea to standardise. So if you've got service areas that are way sort of as you've sort of grown through acquisition, or if you've got multiple crews, either from multiple contractors, the ability to use the one system and get them to follow a standardised process, not just the process itself, and able to standardise your data collection, so you've got some confidence in how the data is being collected and it fits your data model as well. So that would be my sort of big ticket items.
Great.
Andrew, anything wants to add to that?
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. I think in particular that one of being able to standardise systems for people out in the crew is so important, and I think all the project managers who are listening in today would certainly recognise how important that is. I'll go to another question now that's come in from our audience. This is another one for you, Andy, which the question is, how robust is the equipment supplied by Locusview out in the field? Have crews or contractors had any issues?
It's very robust. The tablets are all very ruggedized. The GPS receivers are also ruggedized. The barcode scanners work very well. That really the only issues have resulted with connectivity from time to time, which is not so much an issue with the equipment. It's just they're in a bad area or something like that. They may lose connectivity, but that doesn't happen very often anymore. In the beginning, they didn't really know how to reconnect the devices. Some of these crews had never worked with this type of technology before, so there was a learning curve, obviously. But the equipment's held up well. We did have to teach crews you can't put the tablet on your dashboard of your crew truck in the middle of summer in Texas when it's 110 degrees outside. No electronic equipment works well in that environment, but we've had very little issues with it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andy. That's great to hear. Another question that has come in from the audience is the back-end storage for the data on the cloud? Andrew, as the product expert, I'll go to you on that one. Can you fill us in on that one, please?
Short answer is yes. It's a cloud-based service. We do understand that sort of in countries like Australia, we've got organisations like Critical Infrastructure Commission, etc. And whilst we're cloud-based, we actually host that cloud domestically. So when we move into a different sort of region, we actually set up an Amazon Web Services cloud domestically so that all the data is hosted locally.
Fantastic. And just a bit of a follow-up on that one. What's the offline capability like with the technology?
So the tech will operate offline as much as possible. There's no GPS connectivity. There's other alternatives we've got in terms of laser rangefinders, etc., to the geolocation. Essentially, it'll operate offline with the forms, etc., and then when it reconnects, it then pushes that data back up into the cloud.
Yeah. good to have that one clarified, especially Andy, you did touch on sometimes that we can lose connectivity just for various reasons. That's life in the modern world. The internet doesn't always work and it can drop out. But good to know that it can obviously pick up quite quickly. Let's get another question that's come in from our audience. We've got a delegate here that's really keen to just hear a little bit more about the onboarding process with Locusview, which I imagine actually quite a few of our attendees would be keen to hear a little bit more about that. Andy, can you take us through the onboarding process for you?
Sure. As I mentioned, we used a third-party training organization to help with this. They helped to take help take what Locustview had given us from training material and develop something that they could use to train the contractors and the crews. And they would bring in a number of individual crews. I think we had 7 trainers in locally, and then we had 7 trainers out in the other divisions outside of the Midtex Dallas area. They would come into a classroom environment. They had been given their equipment already prior to coming to class. They would come into the classroom environment. They would spend a few hours actually just talking about the importance of the data they were collecting, because prior to this in the paper world, these crews were taking field notes and they didn't always know what the data was being used for. So they went through a quick primer on, this is the data you're collecting, this is why you're collecting it. And then they walked them through how to use the barcode scanner, how to use the GPS receiver, how to use the tablet, go through all of the digital forms and all the data collection process in the classroom environment. And that would be for the remainder of that day. And if necessary, they would pick it back up the following morning. But usually by the second day, the trainer went out into the field with the individual crews. They were working on a production job. They were not simulating anything. They were back on site, and the trainer stood shoulder to shoulder with them as they developed that muscle memory on how to walk through the application. Am I installing a main or a service? Is it a new installation? Is it a replacement installation? And they would help them build that muscle memory, as I said, and gain that confidence in using it. And they would stay with them through the remainder of that week. At the end of that week, they would evaluate that crew on their proficiency, and they would either say they were certified, they were partially certified, or they really didn't pick up on that. And those crews that didn't pick up on it would go back either through additional training, or if the contractor felt like and the trainer felt like they're just not picking up on the technology, they would send somebody else to the next training session to pick it up. And typically, that's all it really took. We have gone back and done some refresher training. A lot of it we did virtually during the pandemic through videos and Zoom meetings, team meetings, things like that, to do some quality assurance, making sure the crews hadn't picked up any bad habits. But overall, it's been very successful. And we have crews that prior to that maybe had used a laptop, maybe had used a cell phone for different things. Some had never used any of that technology, but you can go back out there today and they would not let you take it away from them. They have found it so convenient to be able to capture that data like that. So that's shown the success of the project to me.
Absolutely. No, thank you for expanding on that, Andy. That's really helpful. And it does kind of touch on the next question that I had that's come through from the audience, which was around objections from staff when implementing the technology. You touched on the fact that, people now will not have that technology taken away from them. When you did meet resistance with implementing this technology, because that can happen and it does happen, and I'm sure everyone listening in today would have experienced it. How did you work with your teams to understand that this was really going to be something that was valuable for them and something that they were really going to ultimately benefit from in a huge way?
I think a lot of that it came about through the conversations we had with the leadership groups, leadership teams, division presidents, their leadership staffs, and gaining their support first of all, and then that trickled down through their management staffs down to their field personnel. And then the proof is in the pudding when they were able to go out and actually use the technology. and see what it could provide, that was the selling point right there. But we had to have that support from senior leadership. Our CEO of the company, I mentioned we have these quarterly all employee broadcasts. The CEO would get up and talk about the technology and that we were going to adopt this, and the reasons why we were adopting it. A lot of the data quality requirements came through an incident in San Bruno, California, and all companies had to go back. Gas companies in the U.S. had to go back and look at their data and start working on ways to improve that traceability and accuracy. And we had those candid conversations with our employees that we had to get better at capturing data.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Andy. I think, yeah, it can be a sensitive conversation, can't it? But there are ways to go about doing it and ways to manage it really effectively.
Sure.
Let's go to another question from our audience. We've got someone that's keen to learn about whether there's a leaner solution that can be provided from Locusview. And I think particularly in the context of hearing about Atmos, which is obviously such an enormous organisation, I imagine there's some people who are listening in today that are wondering how the technology would apply for their business, which is potentially a bit smaller. Andrew, I might go to you on that one if that's okay, because I think that that's probably more in your wheelhouse. Andrew, your thoughts on that question?
So, I guess the short answer to that, is there like a leaner solution? Yes, there is. So, actually, we supply a similar solution to Atmos. So, whilst Atmos are quite large relative to, say, the Australian sort of utility sector, we can supply what we call a turnkey solution. That's where we basically package up all the hardware, all of the software, if you like, the cloud-based sort of software and technology, and hand it over. And as I think Andy sort of mentioned earlier on, provide the help desk support, we manage the services, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the advantages that I liked about the software when I sort of joined the company was that, having done sort of big ERP implementations in the past, you tend to have to sort of do these big rollouts. You have to sort of take it and say, okay, today we're on, version 1, and we sort of cut over to sort of version 2. 500 people go over to version 2, or if you're implementing that technology. So the benefit you've got that we deliver is you don't need to sort of go with 880 crews internally on day one. You can say, well, we want to sort of dip our toe in the water. We want to work with Locusview. We want to start with, say, 2 or 3. And in fact, we don't want to do 2. We don't want to do 2 or 3 on every work program we've got. We want to do 2 or 3 just on mains lane, and then we might expand that into maybe a bit of mains. And I think it's a great way. If you're not the size of Atmos and you're a bit smaller, you might only have about 5 or 6 crews. Start with 1. Get them confident. Get your sort of technology leaders in there, and work it through that way. I don't know if Andy's got any views around. You guys are much larger than sort of some of the bigger sort of utilities here, Andy. So,
yeah, I think that's a good approach, and we've actually visited with other potential clients here in the U.S. and clients that have taken that approach. They dip their toe in the water with just a handful of crews. That allowed them to get used to the technology, to understand the technology, to help with future deployments as they understood how that was going to fit into their overall work management process. So that is a very good way to approach it. And even as large as we are, as I mentioned, we deployed in a phased approach. Instead of doing all 880 crews at one time, we went to Mississippi, for example. They have around 25 company crews and probably 30 contractor crews. We trained all of those crews first, and then we moved to the next state and the next state. And so just a little bit larger scale than the 1 to 5 crews, but still the same process that would be gone through. And Locustview does have the ability to provide training as well, and they train some of our early crews, as a matter of fact.
Great, thanks, Andy. It's just so important to hear that experience from the customer side of things. Looking at the time, we've still got time for a few more questions. The next one that I've got on my list is a question just wanting to know a little bit more about how many companies and organisations are actually using Locusview. So I will definitely go to Andrew on that one. Andrew, can you expand on that one a little bit for us?
So yeah, if we look at the US at the moment, I think it's sort of 20 plus the much sort of larger utilities in the US. We're sort of working with a diverse pack now. It's not just gas. We're sort of working with telcos as well as electricity, and it's not just utilities. We're sort of also working directly with contractors. So more sort of locally here, where we're working with a couple of utilities directly at the moment in conversations with them, and also talking to one or two contractors who are interested in the technology. I mean, we've only sort of just almost landed only sort of 6 to 12 months ago, really. So it's great that there's been some domestic interest as well.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, still have a little bit more time, so we'll keep going with the questions. Andy, this is one that's coming for you. Is the work with the mobile app, does that disturb field workflow, or does it really support the field workflow? Can you talk us through that?
It actually supports it. It was a change, and we had to get people used to that change. But the fact that they can now capture that information so much faster than before. You think about every service line you install, every roll of main pipe that you install, you had to manually write all that information down. It took a lot of time to do that. And then it had to be handed off. Usually the contractor would take it in a field notebook. They would hand it off to someone in their back office who would then have to transpose that into our construction package. And then that would be sent to us, where now all of that is captured in the field. Most companies have found that more techie person on the crew, and that's a lot of their responsibility, is doing that. But they're able to capture the information while other activities are going on. So it really hasn't slowed anything down, quite honestly. If anything, it's sped it up because you can get that data in so much quicker.
Fantastic. Thanks for that answer, Andy. I think we've got time for one last question. One that's come through, just asking about the fact that the digital app building is one part of the Locustview platform. It is broader and wider than that. This audience member is just asking, do we need to actually purchase the entire package in order to get access to the digital as built-in component? This is definitely sounding like an Andrew question, so I'll go to you on that one. Andrew, can you just take us through the situation there?
So thanks, Laura. I guess the way I look at this is, yes, so Locusview, we see ourselves as the digital construction platform, so we can sort of start at the very beginning, electronic job package, right through to the closing package. But in terms of if a client's only need is we just want to digitize the as-built-in process, that's all we want, then that's all you need to take. We've actually got other parts of our workflow where we see actually clients don't start with the as-built-in component, they actually start with inspection. So they say, we want to start with a really simple, just a couple of forms, inspectors taking it into the field, completing the forms and being sort of pushed through that workflow, and then we'll attach that to the project. And as we get used to the interface, we'll start to grow that through the workflow and adopt sort of full digital solution. So the short answer is yes, you can take a part or you can take all.
Fantastic. That's definitely good to know. All right, well, looking at time now, we have come right up to 1:30. So in the interest of sticking to our time schedule and letting people go off and get their lunch or move on to their next meeting, I will wrap things up here for today. Now, if we didn't get to your question, we will forward your question to our speakers along with your email address so our speakers can get back to you. But for now, that does bring us to the conclusion of today's webinar. So I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our speakers who have shared their expertise with us, and to you, all of our attendees who have tuned in and joined us today. Now, shortly after we conclude, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentations and the recording of today's webinar with you all via email. So do keep an eye out for that email in your inbox. But for now, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another virtual event soon.